I can't tell you how important high interest rates are for retirees. So if you're retired, dude, you're a big fan of Jerome Powell and the boys at the Fed. That's just a fact, a jack. Now the Fed doesn't control longer term rates, I grant you, but longer term rates are dictated by what the Fed's doing with the Fed funds rate. So, but the Fed doesn't control the 30-year and 10-year. No, they don't. But those are controlled by the demand for the bonds that are issued relative to what the Fed funds rate are, all right, or is. Anyway, so I'm just, write my book, and it's like, dude, it's such a cluster. I'm all over the place, and it's really frustrating. Because I think I have a plan. I mean, I got a lot of my book done, but I'm just like, oh, man, then this doesn't work. And I'm not trying to make a square peg fit through a round circle, but it's like, I'd like to be there's some fluidity, is that a right word, into the book I'm writing, and it just, right now it's just all over the place. It's frustrating, Well, with that said, I love what I'm doing, don't get me wrong, and it's going to be great. It's just, you're thinking, all right, dude, I'm almost there, and then all of a sudden you hit a roadblock, you're like, oh, how come I didn't think of that? Anyway, so I'm running these things using my man Daniel Kuhlebert's 55e.co spreadsheets. And I'm using the Federated U.S. Government Bond Fund, because that's the longest bond fund we have that's U.S. government solely, in terms of numbers. Excuse me. It goes back to 1970. We have a couple other bond funds that go back before that, but I just wanted a U.S. government bond fund, because U.S. government debt is 100% guaranteed. There's no risk of default or non-interest payment. And so the only one we got is, the oldest one we got is the Federated U.S. Bond Fund. U.S. Government Bond Fund goes back to 1970. So I'm running these numbers. I'm starting with $1 million or whatever, it doesn't matter. But I'm starting with a certain amount of money. I'm running percentages. I'm like, wow, this works pretty well. Because, for stocks, 1973 and 1974 were, if you could survive that, you're probably in pretty good shape. Because that was when the markets got killed. It was down 44% those 2 years combined. Plus, you had mass inflation. So for stocks, if you can survive that, you're going to be good. Most likely, I can't guarantee. Bonds is not the same. Bonds is not the same. I know everyone thinks bonds gets wrecked by inflation. No. If you look at the Federated U.S. Government Bond Fund, it did better, significantly better, relative to a certain income they're pulling out than it did in the 1990s when the interest rates were going low. Very low, not in the 90s so much, but certainly in the 2000s. It's crazy, man. You're sitting there thinking, whoa, because I'm putting the numbers in there like, whoa, this survived. I can't remember what I was talking about. I think I'm taking 6% a year without any inflation adjustments. And so that'd be, for $1 million, that'd be like $60,000 a year portfolio with no inflation adjustments, i.e., we're pulling $1.8 million off that portfolio totally for 30 years. With a 4% rule, you're pulling about 1.9 million. And the bulk of that is in the latter part of your retirement. So anyway, I'm running these numbers like, yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting that this guy could survive 1973, 74. So I started playing around with it, putting 70,000 a year as opposed to 60,000, and most likely it's pretty good for the 73, 74. So I'm getting freaking stoked, dude. I'm like, hey, I'm like Professor Antoine Beauchamp, who's identified something no one else has. But unfortunately, Beauchamp, I'll probably get plagiarized by Pasteur, whoever the financial planning versions of Pasteur are. But then I plug the numbers in for the 1990s, and lo and behold, nope. It doesn't work as well. And the reason is because the interest rates are so low. You're not making enough bang for your buck on your income, on your portfolio, you're just not. So while inflations are high in the 70s, interest rates are high as well. And then what happens is when inflation goes down, interest rates start going down, but your portfolio actually has a capital appreciation to some degree. I hate to say bonds have appreciation, they don't. But your portfolio has better year-over-year returns because of the drop in inflation and thus the drop in interest rates. Now, interest rates were still high in the 80s, don't get me wrong, that's the thing. But the low inflation of the aughts combined with the low interest rates of the aughts were doomsdayers for bondholders. That's just a fact. Just a fact. The high inflation and the high interest rates were wonderful for bondholders in the 70s and 80s. I mean, you can argue all day long that bonds get wrecked by inflation, and your argument for retirees is just not true. It's just not true, man. Anyway, it's very interesting. Sorry, I'm yawning so much. Very, very interesting though, and I'm it's just again throw me for a loophole. And I've known this. I've done videos on this probably 4 years ago, where bonds don't get wrecked by inflation the way people think. But when it comes to retiree pulling money out of there, it just opened up a whole new different So I got 3 models I'm working on. I'm working on Daniel Colbert's model, 55e.co, Craig Israelson's retirement portfolio analyzer at 712.com, and then I'm working on Right Capital, where I create, oh my God, so much, where I create my own investment returns, standard deviations, whatnot. So I got 3 different models I'm looking at. I can make Craig's shine like a freaking champ because the previous year returns, the historical rates of return are just good. That's all there is to it. But then I want to use some real numbers with real funds. That's what Daniel Colbert's stuff can allow us to do. And that can change around the methodology, how much we're taking out and all that. But then when it comes to a simple Monte Carlo analysis, I got to go to Right Capital to do that because neither Daniel's or Craig's does that. They're just historic rates of return. So anyway, I'm looking for the golden chalice that all 3 of these things will work. Daniel's, Craig's, and then Right Capital. And we found a couple, don't get me wrong, which I'll share with you in later videos and certainly in my book, but not yet done yet. Not yet done. I want to see if I can build a better mousetrap. All right, God bless. Love your thoughts.